Hello and welcome. In this video I'm going to give you a run through of our standard install of Ubuntu Server. I'm going to be working with VMware Workstation 12 and Ubuntu 14.04 long-term supported version. This should also work with older versions of Workstation, perhaps 10, 11, and it should also work with newer versions of the Ubuntu Server. We're going to give it a shot with these versions. I'm going to assume that you have already installed a version of the VMware Workstation. Trial version is fine, of course, and you'll need to have installed the ISO for Ubuntu. To do that, go to ubuntu.com. Go ahead and click on the Server tab. When that loads, there should be a button Download Ubuntu Server. Go ahead and click on that. There are usually two versions that will show. The first is the long-term supported version. I'm currently looking at 14.04.3. You can go ahead and click Download. That's the version that I would recommend. The latest version here is showing is 15.10. You can grab that. This will download the 64-bit version. That should work for most of you, especially if you have a very recent version of one of the Microsoft operating systems and an Intel processor. You can take a look here at alternative downloads and torrents. Let me bring that up so you can take a look at it. Here there's a network installer. You probably don't need that, BitTorrent. One thing you might take a look at, though, is under here, Ubuntu 14.04.3, the long-term supported version, is a 32-bit version of the client. If the 64-bit version of the client gives you problems for some reason, perhaps your processor doesn't like it, maybe you have an older Intel processor, something rather like that, then you might need to work instead with the 32-bit version of the ISO. That will solve some problems with older processors or processors that may have some incompatibility. At any rate, download the processor, either the 64-bit client from the 64-bit ISO that I first showed you, or the 32-bit version of the ISO. Save that away on your computer where you can find it. And now let's get rid of this screen here and go back to Workstation 12 Pro. And from this point, we're going to go File and start a new virtual machine. And I'm going to go through the options that I would suggest that you configure. We're going to configure a typical Workstation 12.0 virtual machine in a few easy steps. And let me show you the options that I would recommend. Now, I would suggest that you can do this the easy way, the very easy way, and I'm going to suggest you not do that. That would be to directly link the ISO that you just downloaded at this step. But that runs an easy install, and you miss a couple of options that will make it more difficult for you later. So what I'm going to suggest at this point is that you go ahead and say, I will install the operating system later. That's going to make it easier to select a couple of options that you need to check during the installation process. So go ahead and select, I will install the operating system later, and then click Next. Then your option is going to be Guest Operating System. Here you would check Linux. And then the version that you want to install is going to be Ubuntu. Now, if you downloaded the 64-bit ISO, then go ahead and check Ubuntu 64-bit. If you're going to be working with a 32-bit client, then go ahead and check the Ubuntu. We downloaded, and I'm going to demonstrate the 64-bit client, so go ahead and check that and click Next. Here, the virtual machine name is going to be Ubuntu 64-bit. That's certainly fine. We could give it a different name. We could call this standard install, for example. It will pick a location for it. Usually this will default to a virtual machine's directory, I'm going to actually put this in a different place. My system is set up a little bit differently, perhaps. I have located this on a separate hard drive. If you'd like to put this on a jump drive, for example, you could put this on a separate drive. I have located a virtual machines directory on a separate drive, and so that's where I'm going to be putting that. And as I say, you can use the default directory. That would be fine. It's up to you. You can browse and find a different location. Once you have a location for your virtual machine, click Next. Maximum disk size 20 gigabytes. That's a fine setting. It will start small. It will get bigger only if it needs the space, so you really don't have to worry about that. I would recommend that you leave this radio button checked at split virtual disk into multiple files. That will make it easier to move the virtual machine to another computer. If you have a very large disk, as the note indicates here, that may reduce performance slightly. For our purposes, it's really not going to make any difference, but if you have another purpose, then you may want to take that into account. So we are ready to create the virtual machine. You can take a look at this, look at the options to make sure they're set up. Go ahead and click Finish at this point, and now we're ready to go. And at this point, this is where you want to go ahead and hit the ISO that we downloaded. So what you're going to do is click the CD/DVD icon here, and now is where we're going to check the Use ISO image file. Note that it had defaulted to use physical drive here. Now we're going to check the radio button that says Use ISO image file. I'm going to browse, and here's where we need to locate the ISO image file that we downloaded. So again, I'm going to browse the tree here, go down to virtual machines. This is where I happen to save mine. I'm going to go to the Ubuntu 14.04.3 server AMD 64 ISO. This is the one that I just downloaded. That's the one that we're going to use. Make sure Connect at Power On is checked. That should normally be checked by default. Make sure that's okay. You can take a look at these other options here. If there's anything else that you want to change at this point. For network adapter, I recommend that you start out at network address translation. We can talk about bridge mode later if you want to use bridge mode. But I would recommend you start out at NAT to make sure that you get a connection, make sure that that's working, and so on. And when everything appears to be okay, that's the way you want to work it, go ahead and click OK. And now we're ready to power on the virtual machine and get started. Removable devices, it may give you a message similar to this that shows all of the other devices that can be connected to the virtual machine. You can take a look at those. You may have other drives, cameras, and so on that could be connected to the virtual machine. Each one of these can be connected to the host or to one virtual machine at a time. I would suggest that you just check Do Not Show this hint again. You really don't need any of these for a server, most likely, unless you happen to have an external drive that you would like to connect to the server at time of boot up, and that can be adjusted at the configuration screen that we just looked at. So go ahead and click OK. We are going to start out by selecting the language if you happen to have a language other than English. Now let me talk a little bit about the configuration screen. The server is a command line based. That is, it's not a graphical user interface. And so to capture the screen, you will see the cursor here is your Windows cursor. To get at the command line interface, you need to click inside the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and click to capture the screen. There's a vague purple area in here. Let me press the Control and Alt key to grab the Windows cursor back, and you'll see that my Windows cursor comes back. There's this little purplish area in here, which is the actual command line screen. Let me click on that, and you'll notice the Windows cursor disappears. Now I have command line, and the only thing that works are my keyboard with the arrow keys. In order to get my Windows cursor back again, press the Control and Alt key simultaneously. That brings back my Windows cursor so I can get at my Windows screen. And again, click inside this slight purplish area that you see, and now we're at the keyboard command line interface. And now I can use my arrows keys if I wanted to go up and down or across. I'm going to select English, and I'm going to press Enter. And that's how we're going to select the options here. So I'm going to press Enter for English. And then it's going to install Ubuntu Server. Now, there's a couple of other things you can do here at the installation screen. One would be to check the disk for defects. That would actually be checking the ISO file you downloaded. If you have problems with the installation, sometimes it's because of a bad download, so you can come back to this point and check the disk for defects. You can also test memory. You can rescue a broken system. We won't go through that at this point, but those are some other things you can do at this point. There are some other options. There are some other installation options. You can Google that if you have reason to want to install this a different way. We're going to just do a standard installation here, so I'm going to highlight Install Ubuntu Server and press Enter, and the installation will begin. Now, it's also going to ask you again to choose the language to be used for the installation process. English will be highlighted if that's what you selected at the very first screen. Obviously, you can arrow up and down if you want to pick something else. I'm going to leave it at English. And then the United States will be selected by default. Again, arrow up and down if you want to choose something else. Configure the keyboard. If you would like to have it select the keyboard, or if you have a non-standard keyboard, you can go through a detection routine. It defaults to no. If you want to detect the keyboard layout, you can use your tab key to either go back or tab to yes. I'm going to leave it the default at no, and it will select standard US keyboard if that's what I picked on the previous screen. And then again, I'm going to pick US English. That's the default. Simply press Enter. Press Enter again at this. You can select something else, of course, if that's what you would like. It will detect the hardware, and we'll just let it spin through here. We'll come to a couple places that it'll take some time to go through its routines, and I'll pause the recording at those so we can save some time on the recording. Configuring the network with DHCP, it's working through your local LAN card on your host computer. Now it's asking you to enter the host name for the system. That would be a single word. You can leave this at Ubuntu. That's fine for the standard install for our purposes. If you want to pick something else, it would be a single simple word. I would recommend staying away from characters or from symbols and so on. Just a simple one-word name would be fine. I'm going to leave it at Ubuntu. You can simply press Enter, or if you want to, you can tab so that Continue is highlighted. Either one is fine. Full name for the user. This would be your name if you wanted to. John Smith. I, for the standard installs, use user1. You can either press Enter or you can tab to continue and then press Enter. And then the username for the account, I'm going to let it sit at user1. That's what I recommend for our practice accounts. But this would be a simple user name for the account, which might be an abbreviation of the full name. Again, I recommend user1 for the purposes of our practice systems. Again, press Enter or tab to continue and press Enter. Choose a password for the new user. These are not high security systems for our purposes, but if you were doing this for a real system, of course, you would want to pick something secure. I'm just going to put in password. And then it asks you to re-enter the password to verify. Whatever you put in, be sure to write it down and remember it, because it can be a little bit difficult to resurrect it if you forget it. You may configure your home directory for encryption. I usually recommend not doing that, but if you have some reason to do that, of course, you certainly can. Now it's getting the time from a network time server. This is, of course, assuming that you are connected to the internet. It will make its best guess. You can change this later if you'd like, or you can change it now by tabbing to no and picking from a time zone. It usually does a pretty good job of guessing based on your IP address. In this case, it's correct for me, so I'm going to simply press enter. And now it's going to do some additional hardware detection. Now, at this point we need to partition the disk, and this may sound a little bit scary, but it's actually just partitioning a file on your computer. So it's not actually partitioning your actual hard disk, it's just partitioning an area on your computer you're setting aside for this virtual machine. I usually recommend you don't need to set up LVM, so I would arrow up guided, use entire disk, and you don't need to set up LVM for purposes of these practice virtual machines for the exercises that we do. So I'm going to arrow up to guided, use entire disk, and then I'm going to press enter. There will just be one disk to partition. It's a virtual SCSI disk. You can press enter at this point. And then if you continue, the changes listed below will be written to the disks. Now, of course, if this were a real system, you were installing this on an actual full-blown computer, you'd want to make sure this was correct. But since this is really just a file on your computer, this is safe for you to do at this point. So you'll need to press the tab key so that yes is highlighted, and then press enter. And it will go ahead and partition the disks and start to install the system. Now it's going to ask a question if you need to use HTTP proxy to access the outside world and other proxy information. You almost certainly don't need to do this, so you can just leave it blank. If you do need one, then you probably know that you need one and you would have the information that you would need to enter here. So you can either just press enter or again tab to continue, and it's going to configure the application. It's going to retrieve some files. I'll be editing out these sections where it takes a while to retrieve and install files. So, but be aware that as I'm going along here, some of these operations do take from several seconds to a few minutes to configure. So you won't see those. I'll be editing these out. Now it's completed installing most of the system software, and it's going to ask a few more prompts. One is, do you want to manage upgrades by installing system upgrades automatically? I'm going to recommend that you take the default answer and say no automatic upgrades. You can manage those manually easily enough. So no automatic upgrades, take the default and simply press enter. Now, follow along on this step carefully. There are a couple of things that you normally want to install by default, and if you simply press enter at this point, you're going to miss them. So let me tell you how this works. Notice the red cursor. You can arrow up and down to the various selections here. And then what you want to do is the software that you want to install, press the space bar in order to put a check mark in those. The first one you want to install almost all the time is going to be the Open SSH server. This will allow you to connect to the server remotely in order to access it. So press the space bar, and that will put the asterisk in the Open SSH server. The other one that you will want to install most of the time is the LAMP server. This installs the Apache web server, the MySQL database server, and PHP, and we'll use that for most exercises in the class. The other ones that you can install instead of the MySQL or in addition to MySQL are the Postgres SQL database server. You can also install a Samba file server that will allow you to have file access from a Windows machine. There's also the Tomcat Java server, virtual machine host, a mail server. So if you have reason to install some of these other applications, of course you can check those as well. But at the very least, make sure that you have check marks by the Open SSH server, and most of the time you're going to want the LAMP server as well. When you have asterisks next to the applications that you want to install, then you can use the Tab key to highlight Continue, and then when Continue is highlighted, go ahead and press Enter. And it will start to install that software. It will ask you if you want to install a password for the MySQL database server for the root user. You can leave that blank. That's a bit of a security issue. Security on these virtual machines on your desktop for the purposes that we use them for, perhaps not a big issue, but I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and use the password. The password I recommend and document for the exercises that we do is MySQL, MySQL, all small case, and repeat that. Now, if you want to pick another password, that's certainly fine, but if you pick another password, write it down, document it, and remember it, because as with the first user password, it's a bit of an issue if you install it and then forget it. So write it down, use the one I recommend, or write it down, and it will continue to install software here at this point. And again, I'll edit out the boring parts. Now, at this point, it gives you a message that the Grub bootloader is installed, or it would like to install the Grub bootloader to the master boot record. And of course, again, if this were being installed on a live computer rather than in a virtual machine, then you probably want to think about this, but this is safe. And so you want to go ahead and install the Grub bootloader to the master boot record. This will allow the virtual machine to boot within the VMware installation. So go ahead and say yes. And it will finish the installation. It says to remove the installation media. You really don't need to do that in this case because there's no media to remove. And VMware is set up so that it will boot the virtual machine without having to disable the ISO that we installed from. So just go ahead and press continue, and the system will boot into the VMware virtual machine, which we've just installed. This will be the Ubuntu virtual machine, the Linux server. And this works. This actually boots fairly quickly, depending on your machine. And now you should be able to log in with the username and password that you set up. And recall that we set up user1 with password. And if you did something else, then you would need to do that. So there are a couple of things that we need to do now. And one of those is to go ahead and install any updates that are available since the ISO was released. And in order to do that, we need to do two things. First of all, we need to open up the partner repository because we're going to need to be able to get access to files that are available outside the standard Ubuntu repository for exercises that we will do or for programs that you might want to access that come from other than Ubuntu Canonical, which is the Ubuntu main repository. And so to do that, there is a file called sources.list that we need to edit. And so we're going to enter the following command: sudo, which is the super user do command, nano, which is a text editor, and this is the file. And then we need to enter the password. And this is the file. And this is just a file that lists various repositories of code and applications that you can get at. I'm going to use the arrow key to go all the way down to the bottom. And you can see here that the partner repositories here, let me arrow back up, if you can see here, are preceded by this hash mark, and I'm going to hit the delete key twice, and you see that that made the trustee partner here and the one right below it highlighted there. So I just removed that hashtag and the space in front of those two lines, and that opens up the partner repository, which means I'm going to be able to get at programs and software that otherwise would not be available to us. Now, what I'm going to do next is save the file. This message down here at the bottom is actually hiding the bottom of the screen. So I've released the mouse cursor, and I'm going to click I finished installing here. And now I can see the bottom of the screen. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to do Control X. Let me click on the screen again so that I've got the command line back. And I'm going to do Control X and save modified buffering and answer Y. And then I'm going to just press Enter, file name to write. And that will save the file, wrote 62 lines. I'm still not seeing, because of my monitor resolution doing the video, bottom of the screen. So I released my mouse cursor again by pressing Control and Alt so I can see the bottom of the screen. And I've got my command line back. Now, having altered this file, I need to do two things. I need to update the internal list of programs I can get, and that's with this command, sudo, capture my cursor again, sudo, by clicking in the screen, sudo aptitude update. And what that's going to do is that's going to update the internal list of all the programs I can get from all of these repositories that you see in this list here. Sudo aptitude update, I'm going to press Enter. And it's going to run out and pull all of these repositories and get an updated list. You can see that started. I'll pause the recording till that's done. This takes a few minutes. And that's done. And now what I need to do is I actually need to run an update to get all of the program updates that have taken place since the ISO was released. And to do that, I run this command, sudo aptitude upgrade. Now this is going to take several minutes depending on your connection speed and so on. If you have a high-speed connection, then it runs faster, but it may still take a while because the Ubuntu servers that provide the updates may be busy. So I'm going to run sudo aptitude upgrade, and again, I'll pause the recording while this runs because this may take up to several minutes. It's going to say how many packages need to be upgraded. how many megabytes of archives it needs to get, and so on. Do you want to continue? I respond Y, and then I press enter, and it's now going to update. So again, I'll pause the recording while this spins away. So that completes the upgrade and installs the latest updates to the operating system since the ISO was released. And now there's a couple of things that you want to do to test this and make sure everything is working properly. Probably the easiest thing to do is to load the web page that's created when you install the LAMP stack. To go ahead and test there's a default page. I'll show that to you. And let's just take a look at that here. And we'll take a look at that. So we'll take a look at that. There is a default web page setup. You can see that here. If you look at the /var/www directory, there's a directory called HTML, and that's where your the default web page. So we'll visit that, and you'll see that there's an index.html page, and that's a default web page that's set up when you install the LAMP stack. Now, of course, the question is, how do you get to that? And for that, you need to find out what the IP address of the virtual machine is, and you can run the following command to determine that. And if you'll take a look here, we can see that for the Ethernet card, the default address is 192.168.25.129, and of course you need to run the command. That's going to be different for every machine. What we need to do then, and let me get my Windows cursor back by pressing Control and Alt, and let me load up a browser here and bring that back down to size. And so what we need to do, let me position it here so you can see what I'm doing. Let me type that 92.168.25.129. So what I'm doing is typing the IP address of the virtual machine into my web browser. And if I do that, we'll see what comes up. And you can see then that what comes up is this Apache 2 default web page, and it says it works, and then it gives you some information here. So this is a quick check, and what this is this page is, in fact, this index.html page that's showing up here. So we can tell that the virtual machine is working. Let me show you one other trick. You can, of course, and let me close this out for a second. You can, of course, get to the virtual machine and run it here from this console window. But there actually is a better way to run this. And that's with a terminal connection, what we call an SSH, secure shell connection to the virtual machine. So really all you need to do is get the virtual machine up and running. And then if you have a Macintosh, you can run this from a command line from your Mac using an SSH program. If you're running it from Windows, there's a program called PuTTY. You can Google that, P-U-T-T-Y, and let me demonstrate that quickly for you. So I'll find that here. There we go, PuTTY. And in order to get at the virtual machine from PuTTY, we simply key in that same IP address, 192.168.25.129, and click, and you'll see that this defaults to the connection type is secure shell, and the default port for secure shell is 22. The first time you run this, you'll get this message that the server's host key is not cached in the registry. And of course, if you were on the live internet, then this might be a concern for you, because this can be a kind of a security issue, but you're on your own computer here. So you can just click connect, yes, and it will connect, it will store this key in a file in your computer, so you don't get this message again. And then you log in with the credentials, user 1, and password, and you get the same kind of login you got here. The advantage, one of the advantages with this that you don't get with a console, is as you scroll down, give commands and so on, you actually have a kind of a scrolling window here, which you don't get with a console. So that's handy for looking back and seeing the windows here. Now, when you're done, all you need to do is close this window. That'll terminate the connection. You can say OK to close the session. Now, there's one final tip that I would like to give you. Once you get this all configured and you've documented that it's working, you should do what we call a snapshot. This creates a sort of a backup of your virtual machine. In Workstation, it's take a snapshot here from the VM menu. If you're on a Macintosh, by the way, and I haven't talked about Macintosh, the process is very similar. There's a product called VMware Fusion, and there's a little bit of a difference in the way the initial install works, but the creation of the virtual machine and the rest of it is all very much similar. And there's also a snapshot function in the Macintosh as well. So take a snapshot. You can give it, I would call this as installed. What this means is that if you're going through and working on some of the exercises and there's a problem with a virtual machine, it crashes, there's some other kind of a problem, you can restore the snapshot and get back to the as installed state without having to go through a complete reinstallation. And you can also take additional snapshots as you go along, so that if you run into a problem with an installation, you can restore a snapshot at any given point along the line. And that will save you a lot of time and trouble and aggravation. So recommend you do that. It takes a few minutes. If you'll note down here in the bottom left of the screen, then you'll notice that it's saving the state. And when it gets to 100%, of course, it's saved, and you can continue with your work. So much for the standard install. If you'll look at the exercises that I create, sometimes there are variations to the standard install. There are also a couple of other steps you can take. You can convert this to bridge mode. That's handy if you want to get at this virtual machine from other computers on your home network. You can also configure users to be able to have permissions on the web pages, so that your primary user has permissions on the web page to add files, to modify files. So that'll be handy if you want to work with a web server. There are some other things you can do, and these are covered in other videos or documents, but this covers the standard installation. And so I hope that this video walkthrough will be helpful to you. Thank you very much for watching.